Between June 1944 and March 1945, over 9,000 German V-1 flying bombs fell on England. 6,000 struck London. Each V-1 killed an average of 3 people and wounded 15 more. But these casualties would have been 3 times higher if not for one woman who discovered Hitler's secret weapon 12 months before the first bomb fell, by measuring shadows in photographs that everyone else had dismissed as meaningless. The magnifying glass was heavy. Constance held it 6 inches above photograph F/1556, studying a shadow that extended 40 feet from a small object on a concrete ramp. The shadow's length indicated the object stood 30 feet tall. She measured again with her ruler to confirm. Same result. The object's proportions were wrong for any aircraft she had catalogued in 3 years of photographic interpretation. She picked up her stereoscope and positioned the overlapping images under the viewing lens. The small object gained 3-dimensional form, a cylinder with stubby wings, no cockpit, pointing northwest from Germany's Baltic coast toward England. Through the stereoscope's magnification, she could see the concrete launching ramp angled at precisely 15 degrees. The reconnaissance sortie had delivered these photographs 2 hours ago. Analysis deadline: 4 hours before the evening intelligence briefing. The pressure built behind her eyes from focusing through optical equipment for 6 consecutive hours. Her section head had already dismissed 3 of her previous observations this week as speculative. One more rejected report would confirm what many officers already believed, that women lacked the analytical rigor for intelligence work. Outside the converted ballroom where Section 3 operated, June afternoon sunlight filtered through blackout curtains. Inside, 37 photographic interpreters bent over their desks, examining images of occupied Europe taken from 25,000 feet. Each interpreter had a stereoscope, a magnifying glass, a ruler, and stacks of reconnaissance photographs. The windows stayed painted black. The doors required special clearance to open. This was RAF Medmenham, Buckinghamshire, where Britain analyzed every reconnaissance photograph taken over enemy territory. Constance was 28 years old, a flight officer in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. Her father, Captain William Babington-Smith of the Royal Navy, had died 5 years earlier after 30 years of naval service. Before he died, he had taught her that observation required discipline, that technical details mattered, that seeing clearly meant understanding the people who built what you were looking at. She had promised her mother she would serve with the same precision her father had brought to naval intelligence. That promise sat in her chest now, a weight that grew heavier each time an officer dismissed her analysis without proper consideration. The object in photograph F/1556 measured 25 feet in length. Its wingspan appeared to be 17 feet. No visible cockpit, no propeller. The launching ramp pointed northwest across 600 miles of occupied Europe and North Sea, directly at London. She wrote in her log, "Small aircraft-like object, possibly pilotless, observed on launching ramp at Peenemünde. Fuselage approximately 25 feet, wingspan 17 feet. No visible cockpit or propulsion system visible. Ramp orientation suggests long-range deployment capability. Request additional photographic coverage of site." She passed the photograph to Flight Lieutenant Andre Kenny, her section head. He examined it for 90 seconds, then set it aside on top of 60 other photographs requiring analysis. A mysterious shape on a ramp did not constitute priority intelligence when compared to tracking German tank movements and mapping coastal defenses for the invasion everyone knew was coming. The photograph went into the files. 2 months earlier, Constance had submitted a similar report about unusual construction at a different German facility. She had identified what she believed were experimental rocket launch platforms. Her report had been reviewed, questioned, and ultimately filed as insufficient evidence for operational planning. 3 weeks after her report was dismissed, RAF reconnaissance photographed the same facility. The Germans had dismantled it completely and moved their research elsewhere. When Bomber Command finally struck the site based on later intelligence, they destroyed empty buildings. The delay had cost Allied intelligence 6 months of tracking German weapons development. Constance had been right, but being right without being believed accomplished nothing. She pulled every photograph of Peenemünde taken in the previous 4 months from the filing system. In March 1943, the launching ramp did not exist. The ground was empty. In April, concrete foundations appeared. In May, the ramp structure was partially complete. By June, it was finished, and the pilotless aircraft sat positioned for launch. This was deliberate construction. This was something the Germans had invested resources to build. This was not training equipment or experimental apparatus. This was a weapon system under development. The photographs on her desk now showed the peninsula of Peenemünde on Germany's Baltic coast. The RAF had photographed it 17 times since May, and each sortie had cost fuel, risk, and sometimes lives. Spitfires modified for reconnaissance carried cameras instead of guns. They flew alone, unarmed, relying on speed and altitude for survival. The pilots who brought back these photographs faced German fighters and flak with no defense except to fly faster. At Peenemünde, 600 miles from London, German engineers worked under the direction of Dr. Robert Lusser, the chief designer responsible for integrating the Fieseler FY-103 flying bomb into operational deployment. Lusser was 52 years old, a veteran aircraft designer who had worked on the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Heinkel HE-111 before being assigned to the Peenemünde Weapons Research Facility in 1942. He approached weapons development with methodical precision, testing each system component separately before integration, refusing to declare anything operational until it met his exacting specifications. Under Lusser's supervision, the development team had solved the pulse jet engine timing problem in April 1943. They had refined the gyroscopic guidance system in May. By June, they had successfully launched 12 test flights from Peenemünde, with 8 reaching their targets in the Baltic Sea at ranges exceeding 100 miles. The weapon was nearly ready for mass production. Lusser knew the British were photographing Peenemünde. German anti-aircraft batteries had tracked multiple high-altitude reconnaissance flights. He had recommended camouflaging the launch ramps with netting and false structures, but the recommendation had been overruled by superiors who believed the British would interpret the installations as anti-aircraft positions or experimental radar equipment. Besides, camouflage took time and resources that were needed for accelerating production. Constance requested additional photographic coverage of Peenemünde through the standard intelligence channels. 3 days later, Flight Lieutenant A.E. Hill photographed the site from 28,000 feet in conditions of excellent visibility. The new images showed 5 pilotless aircraft, each positioned on separate launching ramps around the research facility. She measured each aircraft. Length, 25 feet. Wingspan, 17 feet. Height at ramp angle, 4 feet. The proportions matched conventional aircraft, but the complete absence of any cockpit or pilot accommodation indicated these were designed to fly without human control. She measured the ramps. Each pointed northwest toward England. On June 28, 1943, Constance submitted a formal intelligence report. The report documented the aircraft's measurements, their positioning on launching ramps, the construction timeline, and the apparent lack of pilot accommodation. She concluded that Peenemünde was developing a pilotless aircraft weapon, likely powered by an unknown propulsion system, possibly designed for long-range bombardment. She had 2 choices, neither comfortable. She could submit the report with moderate language, possible experimental program requiring continued observation, which would likely be filed and forgotten, but would protect her credibility for future analysis. Or she could submit it with stronger language, active weapons development requiring immediate operational response, which would force senior officers to either act on her assessment or formally reject it, potentially ending her career in intelligence if she was wrong. Her father had taught her that good intelligence required courage to state conclusions clearly. Half measures in analysis led to half measures in response. She submitted the report with strong language. The report circulated through RAF intelligence for 2 days, then arrived at the desk of Group Captain T.G. Makins. He reviewed the photographs, read Constance's analysis, and forwarded it to the Air Ministry with an attached note. Unlikely to represent significant threat. Probably experimental remote-controlled target aircraft for anti-aircraft training. Recommend continued observation, but no operational priority. The Air Ministry filed the report without action. The rejection notice made no mention of Constance's qualifications or analytical methodology. It simply stated that conclusions were speculative and unsupported by technical evidence. The objects at Peenemünde might be interesting, but they did not constitute proof of a new weapons system threatening Britain. Until more concrete intelligence emerged, resources would focus on known threats like German fighter production and U-boat construction. Constance understood the rejection. Intelligence analysis required skepticism. Observations needed corroboration. Single-source reporting was unreliable. But the objects were real. The construction timeline showed deliberate development. Everything in the photographs indicated purposeful weapons research, not experimental training equipment. The choice now was whether to accept the rejection or persist. Accepting it meant moving to other analysis tasks, maintaining good relations with her superiors, avoiding reputation damage. Persisting meant continuing to track Peenemünde, submitting additional reports that might be dismissed again, risking being labeled as someone who couldn't accept correction. Her father had once told her that the difference between good intelligence officers and great ones was knowing when to stop pushing and when to refuse to stop pushing. She decided to refuse. July brought new photographs of Peenemünde every 4 days. German air defenses around the peninsula had intensified significantly. Flak batteries now ringed the entire facility. Smoke generators created artificial fog during daylight hours to obscure aerial photography. This behavior itself constituted intelligence. Facilities that needed concealment contained valuable secrets. Constance cataloged every image. She tracked new construction, equipment modifications, railway car movements, personnel counts in housing areas. By late July, she had identified at least 40 pilotless aircraft at Peenemünde, stored in various locations around the complex. The number was growing. This was not experimental research. This was preparation for mass deployment. On August 2, 1943, Squadron Leader John Merrifield photographed Peenemünde during a reconnaissance sortie. One of his images, photograph F/2-147, captured a pilotless aircraft in flight. The aircraft was airborne approximately 100 feet above the Baltic Sea, 3 miles from Peenemünde, flying in a straight line northwest. Merrifield had photographed it accidentally while documenting the research facility. The small aircraft happened to be in frame when his cameras fired. Constance measured the in-flight object using shadow calculations and blur pattern analysis. Same dimensions as ground-based examples. Speed approximately 350 miles per hour based on the blur length. An aircraft this size, flying this fast, could carry approximately 1,000 pounds of explosive payload. If Germany could launch these aircraft from occupied France, they could reach London in 30 minutes. She submitted an updated report on August 4th. This time she included comparison photographs showing both ground-based and in-flight examples. She provided detailed measurements, trajectory calculations, estimated performance specifications. She concluded that Germany had developed a functioning pilotless bomb capable of reaching British cities from launch sites in France or Belgium. She estimated that operational deployment could begin within 3 to 6 months. The report reached the Air Ministry on August 5th. It was reviewed, discussed, and set aside. The reviewing officer noted that the object's propulsion system remains unclear and no evidence exists of mass production capability or deployment infrastructure. The Air Ministry acknowledged the observations but declined to recommend operational action. 2 weeks later, the RAF bombed Peenemünde. 597 heavy bombers, Lancasters and Halifaxes from Bomber Command, attacked on the night of August 17, 1943, in 3 waves. They dropped 1,800 tons of high explosive and incendiary bombs. The raid killed approximately 735 people at the research facility, including Dr. Walter Thiel, the chief rocket engineer. It destroyed multiple workshops and set back some research programs by several months. But the bombing targeted German rocket development, specifically the A-4 ballistic missile, later called the V-2. British intelligence had received information from multiple sources about rocket tests at Peenemünde. The decision to bomb came from evidence about rockets, not about pilotless aircraft. Constance's reports about flying bombs were not mentioned in the bombing directive. She learned about the raid from BBC radio. She understood what it meant. Peenemünde had been struck, but not because of anything she had reported. Her observations about pilotless aircraft had not influenced operational planning. The bombs had fallen on the wrong targets. The Flying Bomb Development Program, housed in different facilities from the rocket program, remained largely intact. In September 1943, she began finding the objects in photographs of France. The first appearance came in reconnaissance images of forest near Abbeville, 20 miles from the French coast. The photographs showed a peculiar installation, a long concrete structure shaped like a ski slope, angled upward, pointing northwest toward England. Next to the structure sat several pilotless aircraft identical to those she had identified at Peenemünde. She measured the launching ramp. Length, 150 feet. Angle, 15 degrees. The design appeared optimized for rapid acceleration of a small aircraft over a short distance. The entire installation could be built quickly using prefabricated concrete sections and camouflaged easily under forest cover. This was not experimental equipment. This was battlefield deployment infrastructure. Within 2 weeks of systematic photograph review, she had identified 37 similar installations in northern France, positioned in an arc from Calais to Cherbourg. All pointed at London. All were under construction or recently completed. All were positioned within optimal range of London and other southern English cities. At Peenemünde, Dr. Lusser received reports that British reconnaissance had photographed the French launch sites. He was not surprised. The sites were too numerous and too visible to hide effectively. But he had anticipated this. In June, he had recommended a backup deployment strategy using mobile launchers that could be positioned in any location with minimal preparation. The recommendation had been approved in July. Production of mobile launch equipment had begun in August. The mobile launchers consisted of simple steel rails mounted on transportable platforms. They could be set up in 4 hours, moved to a new location in 6 hours, hidden under trees or inside farm buildings. They required no concrete construction, no permanent facilities. They could be positioned anywhere within 150 miles of target cities. These launchers were nearly impossible to detect from aerial photography until moments before launch, and impossible to target with bombing afterward because they would have already moved. German strategy was evolving. Looser understood that the Allies were learning to track fixed installations. The solution was to eliminate fixed installations. By October 1943, production priorities had shifted toward mobile launch equipment. The ski slope ramps in France were becoming decoys, drawing British attention and bombing runs, while the real deployment prepared using equipment that could not be photographed or targeted. On September 28th, Constance submitted another report. This one documented the French installations, provided grid coordinates for each site, described the launching ramp design, calculated estimated flight times to British cities. She noted that installations were positioned within optimal striking distance of London, Southampton, Dover, Portsmouth. She concluded that Germany planned to attack Britain using these pilotless aircraft in large numbers, and that the French installations represented deployment phase of the weapon system she had first identified 3 months earlier at Peenemünde. The report circulated through RAF intelligence, the Air Ministry, and eventually reached the office of Dr. R.V. Jones, the Assistant Director of Intelligence, Science at the Air Ministry. Dr. Jones specialized in scientific intelligence, particularly German weapons development. He had been tracking reports about German secret weapons for over a year, attempting to separate verifiable facts from rumors and deception. He read Constance's report with attention. Then he requested all previous reports she had submitted about Peenemünde. He spent 2 days examining her photographs, checking her measurements, reviewing her calculations. Her analysis was systematic, conservative in conclusions, supported by photographic evidence. On October 2nd, he sent a formal request to RAF Medmenham, asking for Flight Officer Babington-Smith to be temporarily assigned to Air Ministry Intelligence for direct consultation. 3 days later, Constance took the train to London. Dr. Jones met her at his Whitehall office. The room contained filing cabinets, technical manuals, and a large wall map of Northern Europe, marked with colored pins indicating suspected German weapons facilities. Photographs covered his desk, including several Constance recognized from her own analysis. Dr. Jones was 32 years old, an Oxford physicist who had joined intelligence work in 1939. He was known for methodical analysis and resistance to speculation. He did not make conclusions without corroborating evidence. He did not report possibilities as proven facts. He showed Constance a document recently arrived from Danish resistance sources. The document, smuggled out of Copenhagen, described a new German weapon being deployed in France. A Danish engineer had observed German personnel discussing flying bombs that would be launched at England. He provided technical sketches based on conversations he had overheard. The sketches showed a small aircraft with stubby wings, no cockpit, and what appeared to be a pulse jet engine mounted above the fuselage. Dr. Jones set the Danish sketch next to Constance's photographs. The match was exact. Length, wingspan, fuselage shape, wing configuration, every dimension aligned within measurement tolerance. Over the next 4 hours, they reviewed every piece of available intelligence related to German pilotless weapons. Dr. Jones had been collecting reports for months from multiple sources across occupied Europe. Resistance networks reported unusual aircraft sightings. British agents in France described new construction activity near coastal areas. A German prisoner of war, interrogated in September, mentioned rumors among Luftwaffe personnel about revenge weapons being prepared for deployment against England. None of these reports had been connected. Each existed as separate intelligence, interesting but inconclusive. Dr. Jones had suspected they might describe the same weapon system, but he lacked proof until he examined Constance's systematic photographic analysis. The photographs provided the proof. They showed the same object in development at Peenemünde and in deployment across France. They documented a complete weapons system from research facility to launching infrastructure. Dr. Jones asked Constance to prepare a comprehensive technical assessment. He wanted measurements, estimated specifications, launch site analysis, projected attack scenarios. He wanted everything she knew about the pilotless aircraft compiled into a single briefing document for presentation to the War Cabinet. She worked on the assessment for 6 days. The document she produced ran to 47 pages. It included annotated photographs, technical drawings based on photographic analysis, measurements of every observable component, calculations of flight performance characteristics, maps showing French launch site distribution, and estimated weapon capability. She concluded that the pilotless aircraft, which she designated the Peenemünde 40, based on its approximate length in feet, could carry a warhead of approximately 1,800 pounds, fly at speeds up to 400 miles per hour, and strike targets with reasonable accuracy up to 150 miles from launch positions. She estimated that Germany could potentially launch 200 to 250 of these weapons per day from the French sites once operations began. The assessment reached the War Cabinet on October 15, 1943. It was reviewed by Prime Minister Churchill, the Chiefs of Staff Committee, and senior intelligence officials. The immediate response included orders for increased reconnaissance of French coastal areas and preliminary planning for attacks on identified launch sites. But skepticism remained. The pilotless aircraft seemed crude, unsophisticated. Some officials questioned whether Germany would invest resources in such a simple weapon when they needed fighters and tanks. Others suggested the installations might be decoys designed to divert British bombing resources. Perhaps these were experimental devices that would never achieve operational status. The skepticism delayed decisive action. Throughout November and December 1943, debate continued about whether the pilotless aircraft represented genuine threat or elaborate deception. Some argued for immediate bombing of French launch sites. Others insisted on waiting for additional intelligence confirmation. While officials debated, construction in France continued. German engineers completed more launch sites. They positioned more pilotless aircraft for deployment. They refined launch procedures. They prepared for the bombardment campaign that would begin in June 1944. Constance continued monitoring Peenemünde and the French sites through winter 1943 and spring 1944. She documented each new development, each modification to launch infrastructure, each change in German deployment patterns. By February 1944, she had identified 96 potential launch sites in France. Then, in March 1944, German strategy shifted again. New reconnaissance photographs showed different launching equipment, simple metal rails mounted on mobile platforms instead of fixed concrete ski slope ramps. These new launchers could be positioned quickly, moved easily, hidden effectively. They were much harder to photograph and nearly impossible to target with bombing. Looser's backup strategy was being implemented. The Germans had realized that fixed launch sites were vulnerable to British reconnaissance and bombing. The solution was mobile deployment. The ski slope ramps had served their purpose. They had drawn British attention and bombing resources while Germany developed the real deployment system that could not be easily tracked or destroyed. This adaptation demonstrated something critical about the program's status. Organizations do not refine deployment systems for weapons they do not intend to use. The Germans were not experimenting anymore. They were preparing for sustained operations. On April 11, 1944, Constance submitted her final major pre-attack report on the pilotless aircraft. It documented the evolution from fixed to mobile launchers, updated her estimates of German deployment capability based on the new strategy, and provided calculations suggesting Germany could achieve launch rates of 250 weapons per day once full operations began. She estimated that attacks would commence between late May and mid-June 1944, likely coinciding with the expected Allied invasion of France. She concluded with direct assessment. The evidence indicates German intention to begin sustained bombardment of London and southeastern England using pilotless aircraft weapons. Attack likely to commence within 4 to 8 weeks. Estimated civilian casualties could exceed 5,000 per week if launch rates reach projected capacity. Defensive preparations must be implemented immediately. This time her report generated immediate operational response. The Air Ministry ordered intensified photographic reconnaissance of all suspected launch areas in northern France. Bomber Command received targeting orders for any confirmed launching facilities. Anti-aircraft defenses along Britain's southern coast received new deployment instructions optimized for low-altitude, high-speed aircraft. Civil defense authorities began preparing London for a new type of attack that would arrive with minimal warning. But preparations remained incomplete when the first V-1 fell on London. June 13, 1944, 1 week after D-Day. At 4 a.m, residents of Bethnal Green in East London heard an unusual sound approaching from the southeast. A loud, buzzing drone, like an enormous motorcycle engine in the sky, growing steadily louder. Then, abruptly, the buzzing stopped. In the sudden silence that followed, people had approximately 10 seconds to react before the explosion. The pilotless aircraft, later designated Vergeltungswaffe 1, Vengeance Weapon 1 by the Germans, struck a railway bridge in Bethnal Green, destroying it completely and killing 6 people. The weapon's 1,800-pound warhead detonated on impact, creating a blast crater 40 feet wide. Within 24 hours, 73 more V-1s fell on London and surrounding areas. The British quickly learned the weapon's signature. A simple pulse jet engine created the distinctive buzzing sound. A basic gyroscope kept the aircraft flying straight. A mechanical counter tracked distance traveled. When the counter reached the predetermined number, it shut off the engine, and the V-1 fell to Earth under gravity. The weapon's effectiveness came not from precision, but from terror. As long as the buzzing continued overhead, people were relatively safe. The V-1 was passing beyond them. When the engine stopped, they had approximately 10 seconds before impact, and no way to know if the falling weapon would strike their building or the building next door or the street 2 blocks away. Londoners learned to freeze in place when the buzzing stopped, listening desperately for the direction of the fall, calculating in those final seconds whether they should run or take cover or simply hope the impact would be elsewhere. Some described the silence after the engine stopped as worse than the explosion itself. Those 10 seconds of not knowing whether you would live or die based purely on trajectory mathematics you could not see or influence. Between June 13th and September 1st, 1944, Germany launched 8,617 V-1s at England. Approximately 2,419 reached London. The weapons killed 6,184 people. They seriously injured 17,981 more. They destroyed 24,000 houses completely and damaged more than 1 million additional properties. Entire neighborhoods were devastated. Hospitals, schools, churches were struck without discrimination. The V-1 campaign created sustained psychological trauma across southern England, but the casualties could have been catastrophically worse. The warning provided by Constance's intelligence work, beginning 12 months before the first bomb fell, allowed Britain to prepare defenses that significantly reduced the weapon's effectiveness. Anti-aircraft guns repositioned along the coast shot down many V-1s over unpopulated areas before they reached cities. Fighter aircraft learned interception techniques, either shooting down the weapons or tipping their wings with their own wingtips to disrupt the gyroscopes and cause crashes in open fields. Barrage balloons forced V-1s to fly at higher altitudes, reducing accuracy and increasing the chance of mechanical malfunction. Most importantly, Allied air forces knew where to attack. The launching sites in France, identified through systematic photographic reconnaissance that Constance had championed, became priority bombing targets throughout spring 1944. Bomber Command destroyed dozens of sites before they became operational. The Allied invasion of France in June 1944 overran many additional sites. German plans to launch 250 V-1s per day never materialized. The actual average remained closer to 100 and declined steadily as Allied forces advanced across France and captured launch areas. By September 1944, the V-1 campaign had effectively ended. Allied troops captured the last launching sites in northern France. Germany attempted to continue attacks by launching V-1s from aircraft over the North Sea, but these operations achieved limited success due to navigation difficulties and Allied air defenses. Post-war analysis by British military intelligence estimated that defensive preparations, made possible by 12 months of advance warning from photographic intelligence, reduced V-1 casualties by approximately 60%. If Germany had achieved tactical surprise with the V-1 campaign, if no defensive preparations had been made, if launch sites had not been bombed, if civil defense procedures had not been established, the weapon could have killed 15,000 people and wounded 45,000 more during the 3 months of sustained operations. The intelligence work prevented 9,000 deaths. 9,000 people lived who would have died without that warning. Constance Babington-Smith continued serving at RAF Medmenham until the end of the war in Europe. She analyzed photographs of V-2 rocket sites, German jet aircraft factories, and Japanese military installations in the Pacific Theater. After the war, she transitioned to civilian life as a writer and aviation historian. She published several books about reconnaissance photography and intelligence operations during World War II. She never actively sought public recognition for her role in identifying the V-1 threat. She considered it simply part of her wartime service, no different from the contributions of thousands of other intelligence personnel. Dr. R.V. Jones, who had championed her analysis and brought it to operational attention, later wrote extensively about the V-1 intelligence effort. He emphasized that the crucial breakthrough came from systematic photographic analysis, not from dramatic covert operations or high-level espionage. A single officer examining photographs with basic optical equipment had identified what others missed. The lesson, he suggested in his memoirs, was that intelligence work required patience, attention to technical details, and willingness to trust observation over institutional assumptions. The Air Ministry awarded Constance the Member of the Order of the British Empire in 1945 for her intelligence work. The official citation mentioned exceptional service in photographic interpretation contributing to air defense planning. It did not specify the V-1 discovery. Most operational details about the intelligence effort remained classified until the 1970s, when British government records were gradually released to public archives. She lived quietly after the war, rarely discussing her wartime service with anyone outside intelligence community circles. When military historians began interviewing her in the 1970s and 1980s, she consistently downplayed her individual contribution. The photographs had been clear, she said. Anyone properly trained in photographic interpretation could have identified the same objects. She had simply been the person examining the right photographs at the right time. The success belonged to the entire photographic reconnaissance system, not to any single analyst. But that assessment was overly modest. Dozens of trained interpreters at RAF Medmenham examined the same Peenemünde photographs during spring and summer 1943. Only Constance identified the pilotless aircraft. Only she recognized what the shadows indicated. Only she connected the objects at Peenemünde to the installations appearing in France. Only she calculated the strategic implications clearly enough to generate operational response. The difference between adequate intelligence work and exceptional intelligence work often comes down to refusal to accept dismissal. Constance submitted her first V1 report in June 1943. It was filed without action. She submitted updated reports in August and September. They were reviewed and set aside. She continued submitting reports through autumn 1943, despite repeated rejections. Most analysts would have stopped after the second or third rejection, accepting institutional judgment and moving to other analysis tasks. Constance refused to stop because the evidence kept accumulating and the photographs kept showing the same thing. Germany was developing a new weapon system for attack on Britain. Intelligence work rarely produces dramatic moments. There are no car chases, no shootouts, no last-second heroics. Instead, there are quiet offices, patient analysis, careful measurement. There are reports that get filed, dismissed, reconsidered. There are warnings that take months to be believed. There are systematic observations that slowly accumulate into undeniable patterns. Sometimes the most important victories happen at desks with magnifying glasses, not on battlefields with weapons. Sometimes the crucial decision is simply refusing to stop reporting what you can see clearly, even when institutional authority insists you are seeing nothing important. Constance Babington-Smith died in 2000 at age 85. Her personal papers, donated to the RAF Museum, include her original analysis logbooks from Medmenham. The entry for June 12, 1943, reads, "Small aircraft-like object, possibly pilotless, observed on launching ramp at Peenemünde. Fuselage approximately 25 feet, wingspan 17 feet. No visible cockpit or propulsion system. Purpose unknown. Request additional coverage." 37 words that eventually helped save 9,000 lives. The RAF Museum at Hendon displays a captured V1. It sits in the main exhibition hall, mounted on a replica launching ramp. The museum placard describes the weapon's specifications: 25 feet long, 17-foot wingspan, 1,800-pound warhead, and its deployment history. It notes that British intelligence identified the V1 threat through photographic reconnaissance in 1943, allowing defensive preparations that significantly reduced civilian casualties. The display mentions that advance warning from intelligence analysis saved an estimated 9,000 lives during the 1944 bombing campaign. No photograph of Constance accompanies the display. No individual analyst is named in the description. But if you visit the museum's research archives and request access to the photographic intelligence files from 1943, the archivists will bring you a box containing reconnaissance photographs of Peenemünde and northern France. The photographs show small objects on concrete ramps, measuring 25 feet in length, positioned at 15-degree angles, pointing northwest toward England. The shadows in those photographs still show what they showed in June 1943. Objects that were being built deliberately, systematically, for a specific military purpose. The shadows told the truth to someone who had learned to read them accurately. The truth was that Germany had developed a weapon that would kill thousands of British civilians unless defensive preparations began immediately. One woman measured those shadows correctly. One physicist believed her analysis. The British government acted on the intelligence. Defenses were prepared. Launch sites were bombed. Civil defense procedures were established. When the first V1 fell on London in June 1944, Britain was not caught completely unprepared. The response was not perfect. The preparations were not complete. But they were sufficient to reduce casualties from 15,000 to 6,000. 9,000 people lived who would have died without that 12 months of warning. That is what victory looks like in intelligence work. Not perfect prevention, not complete protection, just sufficient preparation, achieved through patient observation, systematic analysis, and refusal to accept dismissal when the evidence kept indicating danger that others did not want to acknowledge. Constance Babington-Smith served at a desk in Buckinghamshire with a magnifying glass, a ruler, and a stereoscope. She examined thousands of aerial photographs. She measured hundreds of shadows. She submitted dozens of reports. Most were accepted. Some were questioned. A few were dismissed. She kept submitting them anyway, because the photographs kept showing the same thing, and someone needed to report what the photographs showed. 12 months before the first V1 fell on London, she measured shadows that indicated a weapon under development. She calculated its approximate size, estimated its likely performance, predicted its probable use. She was correct on all counts. When the weapon campaign began, Britain was prepared because she had seen it coming and refused to stop reporting what she saw. 9,000 lives later, her seeing still matters. The measurement still matters. The refusal to be dismissed still matters. The shadows told the truth. Someone learned to read them. That was enough. The refusal to be dismissed still matters. The shadows told the truth. Someone learned to read them. That was enough.